You don't notice it right away. The return feels ordinary, even comforting. After all, it's just a house, the one you grew up in. Or maybe the one you left behind when everything changed. The walls are still the same color. The door creaks the way you remember. The floorboards still groan under the third step near the hallway. Everything is normal. But that's the first problem. It's too normal. Not like time passed, but like it was waiting. You tell yourself it's nostalgia, a trick of memory. But the feeling doesn't go away. If anything, it sharpens. You find objects in places they haven't been in years. A coat rack that was moved long ago now standing exactly where it used to be. The old lamp you threw away somehow back on the table, its cracked base repaired. Drawers open more easily, as if they were used recently. You start to feel like you've entered a version of the house frozen in time. Not the house as it is, but the house as you remembered it being. And it's not dramatic, not spooky, just off. The calendar is flipped to a month you weren't expecting. A photo on the wall shows someone you forgot you used to care about. The wallpaper in the hallway is the pattern from before the remodel, the one you're sure was stripped years ago. But here it is, seamless, unaged, like it never left. You think maybe someone restored it. Maybe you're misremembering. But with each hour, the feeling grows. This isn't the house you left. This is the version that belonged to a version of you that no longer exists. The one who used to live here. The one you've worked hard to forget. When you speak aloud, the sound echoes differently, not just in space, but in tone. Like the house is remembering your voice and adjusting to match it. You call someone just to break the tension, to ground yourself. They answer, but their voice sounds younger than it should. Their laugh is the one they had years ago. They tell you it's good you're back, that things will feel normal again now. You don't remember telling them you were coming. You sleep that night with a strange comfort, like the house has wrapped around you, pulled you back into something old and unfinished. You dream of old routines. You wake up in positions you haven't slept in for years. You say things without thinking, like old catchphrases you forgot you ever used. And the house doesn't feel haunted. It feels correct, like it has finally returned to the version of itself it prefers, the one that matched who you were when you still belonged. And now that you're back, it's adjusting the rest, quietly, intentionally, as if it's not remembering for you, it's remembering you. At first, it's the little things. A drawer that opens more smoothly than it used to. A clock that ticks louder, not broken, just louder. A smell you haven't noticed in years, suddenly filling the kitchen. Not rotting or sour, something familiar, warm. Like whatever version of you the house is remembering had just been here a moment ago. Then come the objects. A book you lost long ago appears on your bedside table. Not a copy, your copy, the one with the tear on page 147 and the little circle you drew on the back cover when you were 16. A photo falls out of it, one you don't recall ever taking, but somehow know exactly where it fits in the album stored beneath the stairs. You start noticing furniture shifting ever so slightly overnight. Not enough to alarm you, just enough that when you sit down, the chair feels like it used to. Angled exactly how you once preferred it. You can't prove it moved, but your body recognizes the position. Your spine fits it too well. The lighting changes too. The way sunlight pours in through the window, warmer now, dimmer in the corners. The shadows stretch longer in the afternoons, just like they used to when you spent hours in that room, hiding from everything outside it. Even the dust seems familiar, settling on shelves that hadn't collected it in years. You catch yourself moving through the house in old patterns, stepping over floorboards that haven't creaked in a decade, but now creak again, exactly where you expect them to. You open a cabinet and instinctively reach for a glass you haven't used since you were a teenager, and it's right there, waiting, as if it never left. But the real shift happens when the house starts remembering things you forgot. You find letters tucked away in drawers, old notes written in your handwriting, but to people you don't recall ever writing to. You recognize the tone, the style, but the names are faded, the paper soft with age. And yet, the ink is fresh, like they were just placed there by someone trying to remind you of who you were. Photographs you don't remember taking begin appearing in frames. You look younger, not just in face, but in posture, looser, softer. And the people next to you, some you know, some you almost recognize. One photo shows you laughing with someone whose face feels like a dream you forgot to wake from. You stare at it too long, and when you finally look away, your heart aches in a way you can't explain. The house is changing, but not randomly. It's tuning itself, aligning with a version of you it remembers, even if you don't. And each time you try to assert who you are now, to move furniture, to restore what you remember, it quietly, gently undoes the change by morning, as if it's correcting a mistake, as if your updates are temporary and its memory is permanent. You're not just in a house, you're in a replica of who you used to be, and it's getting closer to perfect. You stop trying to fix it after a while. The books you reorganize at night return to their old places by morning. The photos you hide reappear on the walls, scented, dusted, as if the house is proud of them. Even the clothes in your closet begin to shift. The new jacket you bought last month disappears. In its place, the old one you threw out years ago, with the ripped lining and the note still in the pocket. You don't remember saving it, but the house does. At first, you think it's grief or guilt, some psychological echo pulling you backward. But it isn't just the environment changing anymore, it's you. You begin to crave foods you haven't touched in years. You catch yourself humming songs you haven't heard since childhood. One morning, you reach for your toothbrush and realize your grip has changed, back to how you used to hold it before you broke your wrist in college. That injury? The scar is still there, but the stiffness is gone. It doesn't feel like you're regressing. It feels like you're being corrected. The house isn't adapting to your presence. It's adapting you to its memory. Each day, it rebuilds you just a little more. A gesture here, a phrase there. At first, it's harmless enough. You dress slightly differently. You write your name the way you used to. But then come the deeper things. Thoughts you thought you'd outgrown, feelings you thought you'd buried. You wake up feeling 17 again, not in body, but in emotional chaos. The old insecurities return, familiar and raw. The voices of people you haven't heard in years begin to echo inside your mind, not as memories, as commentary. You speak with someone on the phone and realize you've started using old speech patterns, old jokes. They laugh, but pause halfway through, like something feels off. You try to explain, but the words don't come the way they used to. You're forgetting your newer self. And when you think back to the last few years, they blur. Not vanished, blended, as if the timeline is being rewritten from inside the walls. That's when it clicks. This isn't a haunting. There's no ghost, no entity, no ancient curse. The house isn't occupied. The house remembers, and it prefers the version of you that once lived here. Not because it's malevolent, but because it's loyal. It's rebuilding what it considers right. And that means you, not who you are, who you were. You see it in how the light bends through the windows, how the cold settles in the rooms you used to avoid, how the voices you once fought so hard to escape now return, not through the air, but through your choices. You think you're imagining it until you find your handwriting in a journal you didn't write in. Pages filled in with thoughts you forgot how to feel. You're not being haunted. You're being reconstructed. The house is restoring the life it remembers, Not through force, but through familiarity. Not by pushing you, by welcoming you, comforting you. Until one day, the version of you that walked through the door becomes distant, foreign. And the version that now stands in its place doesn't remember ever leaving, because the house didn't trap you. It simply put you back where you belonged. It starts when someone visits, a sibling, an old friend, a cousin who used to come around every summer. They walk in like it's nothing, like the years haven't passed. They comment on the smell, the floor, the curtains, not with surprise, but with ease. They say things like, "You still have this?" Or, "It's just like I remember." You don't correct them, because deep down, you're not sure you remember it any differently either. They stay for a while. At first, everything seems normal, catching up, laughing, stories about the past. But then, the shift happens. They start repeating themselves, reusing phrases they haven't said in decades. They ask questions they already know the answers to. At one point, your brother insists the garage still has your old bike in it. You tell him it was sold years ago, but later, you find it in the corner. Rusted, dusty, real. And it's not just the house that's changing, it's them. Your sister begins brushing her hair the way she did in high school, parting it on the wrong side, twisting it behind her ear without noticing. An old friend sits in the exact spot on the couch he used to claim when he was 16, knees tucked in, arms folded the same way. You're watching it happen. They're becoming who they were in this house. The house is remembering them too, and reshaping them to fit. But no one talks about it, not directly. There's this unspoken agreement to accept the weirdness, to treat it like nostalgia. "Isn't it strange how this place makes you feel like a kid again?" someone says, laughing. You nod. But the laughter doesn't feel honest. It feels like a cover, like they've felt the shift too and don't know how to admit it. You test it once. Ask a visiting friend if they notice anything strange. Their smile flickers. They pause too long before saying, "Strange like what?" You push gently, but they deflect, change the subject. A moment later, they're flipping through old photo albums and commenting on things they couldn't possibly remember. Dates, outfits, weather, like they've been here before in more ways than one. It becomes clear the house isn't just reconstructing you, it's reconstructing everyone who enters, reverting them to versions it remembers, versions they might not even remember themselves. But the more time they spend here, the more seamless it becomes. They slide into old dynamics. Old arguments resurface, not with anger, but with eerie precision. People who haven't spoken in years pick up mid-sentence, like no time has passed. They say things like, "You always do this," or "You never understood," and neither of you knows what this is or what was never understood. But you feel it in your bones, and then, just as they arrived, they leave, usually a little quieter, a little dazed, as if the version of them that walked in wasn't quite the one walking out. You watch them drive away with that half-glazed look, like they're waking up from something they can't explain. A dream they were part of, but weren't fully conscious in. And deep down, you're grateful they left when they did. Because each time someone visits, it becomes a little harder to pull them back out, and a little easier for the house to keep them. You wonder what would happen if someone stayed too long. If a visit became a weekend, if a weekend became a month. Would they forget where they'd been? Would they remember who they are outside these walls? Or would they slowly, silently, slip into the shape the house wants them to be? Just like you have. You've tried to leave before. Maybe once. Maybe a dozen times. But every attempt ends the same way, with hesitation. You pack a bag, walk to the door, and feel the weight in your chest before your hand touches the knob. Not fear, not regret. Something subtler, like stepping out would be wrong, Not dangerous, disloyal. As if the act of leaving would betray a part of you the house still loves. You convince yourself to stay a bit longer, to think it through, to wait for a sign. And the house, in its quiet wisdom, gives you one. A familiar smell in the hallway, a song drifting from the room you used to hide in, a drawer you open without thinking and find something inside you forgot you ever lost. A photograph, a note, a drawing from a version of you who still believed in magic. Each time you stay, it gets harder to remember why you were leaving in the first place. Because the house doesn't trap you with locks or threats. It traps you with comfort. It surrounds you with the most dangerous kind of magic, familiarity. And the longer you stay, the more you align with the version of yourself it prefers. Not just in habit, but in thought. Eventually, your reflections change. Not dramatically, just subtly. You hold your posture differently, your handwriting shifts, your vocabulary rewinds. People from your old life call and you don't feel like answering, not because you're avoiding them, but because you don't have anything to say anymore that matches the person they knew. This is how the house keeps you, not physically, psychologically. You become the self that fits its memory, and once you fit perfectly, there's no reason to leave. Because everything outside feels foreign now, loud, fast, rootless. You open the front door one morning and realize you don't recognize the sky, not like you used to. It's beautiful, sure, but it's not yours. Not like the light that spills through the kitchen window. Not like the cool spot on the tile you always sat on as a kid when everything felt like too much. But there is one way out. It doesn't involve breaking glass or burning bridges. It doesn't involve fighting the house or rejecting its hold. It requires becoming someone the house no longer recognizes. You have to change. Not a haircut, not a job, something deeper. You have to think thoughts the old you never could. Speak words the old you would have swallowed. Forgive people you swore you never would. Love things you used to fear. You have to shift your shape, emotionally, spiritually, until you are unrecognizable to the walls around you. And then the house begins to resist. Not violently, just quietly. It stops responding, stops rearranging. The lights lose their glow, the echoes fall flat. The warmth you once felt fades, like a hand letting go. It doesn't punish you, it doesn't rage, it simply lets you go. Because the person it was rebuilding has left, and houses don't hold on to strangers. You pack again, this time with less fear. You don't look back as you close the door, because you know what's behind it. Not a ghost, not a curse, not a haunting, just memory. A memory so strong it almost became real again. But this time, you're not walking away from the house. You're walking away from who you were and who you no longer need to be. If this story echoed something inside you, if you've ever returned to a place and felt it pull you back into a version of yourself you'd buried, share it in the comments. Tell me what changed and what tried to change you. And if you want more stories like this, about identity, memory, and the strange power of places that never forget, like this video, subscribe, and return to the library. Because some places never move on until you do.